Hello, Meoni here, and welcome back to another trailer analysis. We've done this before for 5.1 and other patches before it, but this time around I really wanted to dig deep and look what 5.2's trailer really hides beneath the surface. Now, it's a fantastic trailer, and I will of course link this in the description for you to go check out, but I thought I'd do a little bit of digging around and share what I found with you. Don't hesitate to show what you found in the comments below. So here's my analysis for this trailer, which is for 5.2, The Echoes of a Fallen Star, which releases next Tuesday, the 18th of February. The trailer kicks off then with the Peggy 16 logo, fading quickly into the alarm bells inside an Imperial installation somewhere. Soldiers are saluting and rushing about, preparing to launch Ruby Weapon, which stands in the background of this shot. You can see the Magitech walkers in the background of another establishing shot here, giving you a clear indication of the installation being Imperial of design. The logo fades in and out of black for Square Enix, and then we get a nice close-up of the Ruby weapon itself, preparing to deploy. It's gargantuan size, shimmering with ruby metal, and that horrific face there with teeth. The next shot actually establishes that they have a pilot inside of Ruby Weapon, so much like the Ultima weapon, you have to have someone inside, which I suppose takes some of the terror away from this looking like a monster, but truly someone actually pilots it. You'll note that this pilot is clad in red spandex, appears to be female, and if you look to the top there, you can actually see that she is very much a blonde. Who could this be is anyone's question right now, perhaps an old acquaintance of Gaius's that we get introduced to in the Whirlite side story centered around this new trial. The next shot shows her bringing the weapon to life as the paddles glow and the panels in front of her light up with what seems to be like telemetry, as we get a close-up of those panels now, which seem to show some form of like atomic display there, that mock-up displays of presumably how the reactor's working in the machine, etc. You can also see out of this cabin from where the pilot sits, so I guess they're working on the projected display idea from the outside world via cameras projected inwards, removing then the need for a physical canopy in this particular design. This next shot, we see the flight doors to this installation building are open and the lights are turning from red to green. These are flight lights, and the weapon is ready for launch and presumably takes off here. We now see the Shadowbringers logo fade in and out, and then we see a battlefield that very much looks like Gimlet Dark, with all of those smashed up Magitech things there, with crashed air units about. I was immediately going to say this was a bit like Cartano, but I think it's very much more likely Gimlet Dark, as the devastation seems way more recent, and the dark sky there feels quite familiar to that instance. In the distance, as the camera pans up, we see a red light appear, which gets bigger, and then is revealed to be Ruby Weapon, shimmering red as it flies towards the field. We immediately see battle scenes with a white mage in the foreground moving sideways as this 8-player team deals with the new trial, the Cinder Drift. There appears to be a rush mechanic, as a few angled shots illustrate for us. Firstly, it's heading towards the camera, and then a top-down perspective showing the AoE arrows on the ground. Presumably this is similar to the charge abilities that we know from Ifrit and the like. It seems after a while, however, it uses its massive wing-mounted rockets to propel itself upwards, and then we see this sort of like raw-like blur animation as it plunges downwards with its rocky foot straight into the arena we fight it in. This is very likely its ultimate move then, maybe even an active time maneuver, if past trials are anything to go by. Dust plumes up from the impact of the foot in this shot before it resumes its assault. This next slide does offer something interesting. The chest-mounted ruby gem on this mech seems to emit a red glow and this sort of ball. Perhaps this is a charged attack, but at the same time, Ruby Weapon digs those immense claws into the ground, where they seem to extend, so much like the original Ruby Weapon fight back in Final Fantasy VII that had a similar mechanic. Shortly thereafter, the ground erupts all around the party with upward explosions of both the spiked claws and the rock that was there previously. It then seems to be exploding all around the room as well. Clearly something to try and avoid, no doubt. It looks like an incredible fight from what little we get to see. And next up we get a fade to the first dialogue of the trailer. We see a hand from a male Aurora holding back a female Aurora dressed in crimson red. The voice of Gaius now speaks over the scenes, now saying, "It was my hand that kindled these flames, and I cannot allow them to spread any further." So presumably he's dealing with his past there. An admirable confession then from the guy that apparently is behind the creation maybe of Ruby Weapon. The All-Ra characters presumably involved in that backstory in some way as well, and I'm sure that'll all be revealed in due course. They do appear to be in the Garlean installation themselves in these scenes, so speculation starts there, I suppose. The other shot we see during this section is Gaius in Alamigo talking to Raban. Presumably then my idea that the Ruby Weapon is being fought at the Gimlet Dark would be correct. Gaius may have very well come over to Alamigo to help Raban and the Resistance with intel about the weapon being deployed there and to help against the fight. It would appear that this is from a third-person perspective in this particular scene, and I don't see the Warrior of Light, unless of course we come in during that cutscene, but it could easily be a flashback-style sort of echo scene as well, but either way, we'll have to come back to the source to fight it anyway. Next is more Ruby Weapon. They really want to show us more of this fight, which is quite surprising. This shot showing a mechanic with markers above everyone's heads. In the back, Ruby Weapon is preparing an attack with outstretched spikes, which is quite menacing. So is this a spread mechanic? It doesn't really seem that way as they sort of stand in the middle. And under the feet of players, there seems to be a sort of red AoEs that appear as this big attack goes off. So perhaps this is a stay in the middle to avoid an AoE until the attack goes off and then spread the markers mechanic, but it's pretty hard to speculate at, to be honest, at this point. Next we see a Machinist using this particular ability in this fight, which raised a few eyebrows for some members of the community, as Ruby Weapon stomps repeatedly on the tank. This is probably its normal attacks, maybe not a tank buster, but quite easily could be. A few more battle scenes looking pretty awesome once again, and then a cut to black. Next, we fade from black into another portion of 5.2, and this is the main storyline. We see the Warrior of Darkness, Y'shtola, Reen, Thancred, Urianger, Alisei, and Alphino all walk into presumably Amnesis Anida, the new dungeon, or at least another portion of Amarot we've not seen yet in MSQ. Y'shtola walks up and sort of looks at this pillar that's glowing blue that the camera focuses on. Urianger says in the English version, "In such vessels did the ancients preserve concepts." As we then see some bosses inside Amnesis Anida, including the Cyclops thing that they've shown on the 5.2 special site, which is sort of weird because he's wearing an outfit suggesting that he might have been a humanoid at some point in the past. This is a run with truss, as you can clearly see in the clip, as you can see with the Scions in battle. We also get this wonderful outside shot of the dungeon of the Truss group running into yet another section of it. I love the lighting in here, it's very nice. You can tell that this was all underwater before we used the first Bismarck to create a bubble around it. There's lots of coral and detritus from being under the ocean for hundreds or maybe even thousands of years. Another monster or boss here is this floating sort of sylphy guy. I forget the name of these creatures actually, but you can see them in the last zone in Fates and the like. Next up, we get a completely unrelated shot of the Warrior of Darkness meeting the new beast tribe, the Qitari. In this shot, the Qitari character appears to be doing something to this large crystal in the Raktika Greatwood where the beast tribe is hosted, which causes it to glow. Next up, we get some unrelated dialogue, which we should talk about before looking at the scenes on screen. "Ideal forms to be drawn upon in the act of creation," says Urianger, still outlining this storyline from the MSQ of the patch there. The scene on screen, however, is the new ocean fishing content, and this is presumably the procable bounty that can spawn randomly to someone fishing, where everything turns etherical around the boat. And this, as they discussed in the last live letter, increases the bounty of fishing rewards for everybody taking part in the fishing on the ship. Next, we have a shot of the bazooka used in the new Diadem instance for the Ishgard restoration that's gathering only. This bazooka is a weapon that you can use against the now passive-only mobs that are located in Diadem. When you've gathered enough normal items, this fills up the ether meter on screen. Each bar of this filled meter allows for one blast from the bazooka, and then you can pick up materials from the monster that dies, so it gives you something to work towards inside there. Next, we cut back to more Amnesis Anida, presumably with this unusual room with weird capsules of some sort Then we switch to more footage of the dungeon with this monster jellyfish, Oriange in the corner there during this continued trust run. Some more epic looking bosses, this turtle-like guy with water jets in the shape of hands that seems to smash down on the arena whilst you're fighting, which looks pretty cool. And then we switch pace to a new scene where we see high heels as a female character walks into view. This is Gaia, the character designed by Tetsuya Nomura, and the girl we saved from the second Eden fight last time around in the Eden Raid series. She walks to the center of this brown-looking desolate area and raises her hand to the sky, to which red energy emits, and then we see a shot of one of the new encounters in the new raid tier for Eden's Verse. This appears to show strange-looking birds flying around like a flock of seagulls or something in the center, and in the center there is a floating crystal entity. We see a raid group dealing with the enemy, surrounded by a flock of birds, presumably protecting it. There are laser beams and more multicolored laser beams that shoot all across the screen and the like, and it looks quite fun indeed. Next, we see the second preview of a fight from a new Eden raid, confirmed recently to be a cross between Ramuh and Ixion. Lightning streams down as they reveal Ramuh's face, looking epic with wings and a cold black stare. We see some explosive footage of a fight, lightning everywhere, presumably from a judgment attack or something like that. And then we see, amongst all of that carnage, the true shape of Ramuh with that horse body from the waist downwards from Ixion, and that beautiful red trident, looking pretty shocking indeed. The arena is also shown to be a gridwork of panels on the floor, which is very probably used during a mechanic of the fight. I would guarantee it. Next, after a few more flashes of lightning, we see the next fight. So this is the third fight of the Eden tier that they're showing off. Both a weird-looking Ifrit and Garuda float together. Again, this fight inspired by the clouded memory of a Warrior of Light, and these two are slightly close to their original fight types, but obviously Ifrit looks quite a bit different, like he's wearing a suit or something, like a bodysuit. But Garuda's pretty similar, I would say, just a lot more wings in general. Lots of spell effects cover the screen here deliberately to cloud any kind of analysis of what's going on, but we do see that the outside of the arena does have a fire circle, so presumably this is another instant death area if you were to walk into it. It seems like Garuda is there to team up, and presumably you sort of fight Ifrit alone, Garuda alone, and then them together, but that's purely speculation. I'm sure she will fan the flames of death at you either way. Quite the scary concept, actually, for a fight indeed. Right, and then back the camera cuts to somewhere, presumably a ruin. This architecture feels like Ronkan sort of, architecture in design. So I think maybe it's back in the Great Woods ruins again. The Scions and the Warrior of Darkness walk through these halls, and then we get to see another mural on the wall. The Viera from the Raktika Greatwood are here too, so that adds more evidence to the location. The altar-like area here and this mural, which I'm not really sure what this is, stands ominously before them. Y'shtola's voice speaks out here saying, if, as the Exarch's research suggests, soul and mind share a fragile yet profound bond, might it not be possible for an event to leave such a deep imprint on the soul that it could be perceived eons later? Cryptic stuff indeed. We then get to see a shot of a character in the Crystarium with a scar across his face. I have absolutely no idea who this is. Somebody mentioned on Reddit it might be someone's grandson, but I can't remember exactly. My mind completely fails me here. Perhaps you do know, let me know in the comment section, but our character doesn't appear to have many real feelings for them as they walk off. We then see the Numo character from the MSQ previously look backwards towards the portal to the source next to Graha Tir, and then we fade to black. The next thing we see is clouds start to appear over the Crystarium. They rapidly approach as the Warrior of Darkness looks up in awe there. Next to him you'll see is Alisaie and Alphino. We then flick to more of Gaia, but this time you can see she's fighting off the darkness. We get a good shot of her being sort of infused with darkness, perhaps from that floating red crystal, which presumably is the first boss of the new tier. And so I guess she's being manipulated by this darkness or something like that. We'll have to wait and see. Either way, leave our goth waifu alone, damn it. We've only just got her. We then see Amarotian spirits gathered around here, presumably during more of this storyline reveal, and the storyline is said to be quite massive in this patch. stretching at least over an hour, so that'll be quite interesting to see. Next, we get a shot of Orbon, or sort of Rabanasta, I would imagine, with Garlean banners draped and a massive Garlean airship docked here, and floating Magitech. This makes sense if you remember the end of the Ivlis raid series. We actually saw a group of Garlean researchers come in and take artifacts under the orders of a man that looked like Gabramp from Final Fantasy XII, who, sure enough, is mentioned in the latest live letter to be revealed as the legatus of the 14th Legion, Noah Van Gabramp. So that's kind of why he looks similar, because he pretty much is this world's version of that same character. So this will be in the follow-up to the Ivlis raid and the intro to the new Relic weapon series, and this is the content focused on the Bosjar Citadel, and presumably we would get to fight against the Empire to try and liberate Bosjar, which is under heavy oppression. The implications of using technology from the clockwork city of Moog, however, under Garlean control is quite interesting if you think about it. There's lots of old Allagan-era tech that could be used as weapons of mass destruction, of which I'm sure we'll see quite a lot of. After another fade to black, we see Y'shtola touching rocks in those Ronkan sort of ruins again, followed by this crazy-looking outdoors shot of somewhere. This is probably Bosjar Citadel, and to do with the Relic. There's plenty of strange things happening in this trailer. Y'shtola then says, in which case, none of this is mere coincidence. It's interesting because then we see what appears to be the solo instance in this area with Sid Garland and a character from the Ivlis series, the Aura girl I forget the name of, in his solo duty across the screen like sort of time has frozen. Things are sort of floating in space and rocks don't appear to be falling at all. And you, Sid, and the Aura lady are running through it as though it was the solo instance they talked about in the live letter. We see Sid joining you in the fight against some Garleans, so this is very clearly the Bosjar Citadel as you actually see it in the distance here, this massive tower. I personally think that the Garleans have used experimental weaponry here, and this is the stuff they found in the clockwork city of Moog after the return to Ivlis raid series, and now it's left in ruins like this. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Next up, though, we see a strange shot of our Warrior of Darkness and the Scions meeting up with none other than Ardbert. Big question marks here. There's then a shot of a mural which looks a lot like real-world sort of Hindu Shiva or something. I mean, in the very loosest of senses. I've actually seen some people speculating on the internet that this is even Hydaelyn, so it could be anyone at this point, but it's some kind of being. We then get to see more of the Bosjar Citadel instance then, with Sid by our side and the Garlean banners everywhere once again. Really cool Dark Knight explosions and a cutscene with the Aura girl from that Ivlis series. The Warrior of Darkness seems to have some sort of object in their hand in this scene, which is a glowy sort of cuboid thing. And then we get to see more of this solo instance as we rush towards a room, seemingly further inside the Citadel itself, where the most devastating cutscene of all, of Sid coughing up blood whilst clenching his chest, happens, which is frankly horrifying. Please don't hurt my Sid, Yoshi P, please. He's like one of the best underused characters we have. Next we see Ardbert, or somebody or something looking like Ardbert, stride through the courtyard in the Crystarium. Our character doesn't really seem too impressed by his presence, as this Ardbert character seems to smile quite worryingly. A voice in this scene actually plays, probably Ardbert's, that says, "Only by the will of the star itself could such a miracle come to pass," which is quite an ominous sort of thing to say indeed. Next, after a fade from black, we see an injured Sid suddenly joined by teleporting in Scions. Urianger, Alice, Alphino, Y'shtola, and the Warrior of Darkness are in presence, so since this is in the source, I guess everyone finally got their body back, huh? Kind of anticlimactic sort of spoiler there. Next, we see a shot of my favourite goth chick again, chilling in a pool of darkness and despair. Like, this world is just so dark, man. Clearly falling to darkness as the crystal thingy did something to her then. Okay, so next up we have Xenos in what appears to be Amarot. Yeah, you can see a shade walk past him as he walks through the scenes that we actually saw back in the Amarot dungeon. Firstly, Xenos is now on the thirst. Secondly, that new outfit of his is really sexy, isn't it? Seriously though, the idea of Xenos is now here only furthers the idea that he wants to control the power of an Ascian. His resonant powers act very much like the Echo. He seems to be able to hop bodies, and he was integral to the Ascian plot for quite some time. So he kind of knows what he's doing, I would imagine, but I don't think we can even imagine at this point what he's going to do. There are clearly some implications for him being here, and none of them seem to be very good for our character, or indeed our world in general. Grahat here in this shot looks in pain as he clasps his hand and sighs. And then we then see Dalamud in the skies, or at least another Dalamud-type cage of something above the Bosjar Citadel, which is all the hype at the minute with the community, with speculation. Alphino simply says, "By the 12" in the English version, as he stares up in disbelief and complete horror. And then we see the mural from earlier again, which looks like a Viera with a staff, and fire is falling all around her. We then pan back to the Citadel, where clouds over the Dalamud-type construct explodes, much like in the Calamity scene in the 2.0 trailer, as meteors stream down all around the Citadel itself. But then we get a shot instantly of Amarot again with meteors falling there. So this is very clearly a flashback of what happened to Amarot in the past happening in the present, as sort of like a replication what Xenos walks around. But at the same time, we have side-to-side scenes with the source and our current predicament with something that looks like Dalamud here actually going off as well, which is quite interesting. We then have more footage of Xenos walking around through Amarot as it's burning down from that calamity so many, 100 or thousands of years ago, and then a shot back to the Warrior of Darkness where the Dalamud sphere seems to actually collide with the ground. This is quite interesting to point out that if this is actually happening and this isn't just some weird imagery, this is pretty bad. This would mean the end of quite a lot of things. The only reason the real Dalamud back in 2.0's trailer didn't destroy the world was revealed because Louis Soir, if you ever completed the Coil of Bahamut cutscenes and that raid series, you see a secret cutscene where he essentially uses his entire life force to stop it from colliding with the ground, and it still ends up reshaping the world. So for this one to literally strike the ground on impact, well, that's going to be pretty hard to survive and definitely hard to explain. It literally fills the screen with an explosion not unlike a nuclear blast from a warhead, and then we get the logo appear into view for Echoes of a Fallen Star. During the logo, we actually get one final voice line from Elidibus that says, "Emmet Selk, how very unlike you to err so gravely." And there we go. What a trailer. My goodness. Now, before we get all crazy with speculation, let's just review something from the other trailers in other languages. Most notably, I want to look at the French trailer. The spoken dialogue says something a little bit different. This won't take any time at all. Gaius in the French version says that the time has come to finally deal with this past that I thought was behind me, which is quite different. I think you'll agree to the English version. Oriange's lines include, "These crystals surely contain what the Amarotians called concepts. This would mean that they stored here their ideas they used to shape the world." This is again quite vastly different to the English version, offering way more storyline and depth to that conversation. Y'shtola says in these lines, "Imagine if the picture of a distant apocalypse is etched somewhere deep within our soul. Emmet Selk asked us to never forget they existed." Which, I mean, damn, that's a cool piece of information we didn't get from the English version for sure. Reen says, "Where is all this light coming from?" Which is a vast difference to what the English Reen says about not being able to handle the light. And Y'shtola also says, "I can't believe it, mere coincidence," which is actually quite less informative than our English version. Ardbert says, "Take your fate into your hands and become the Warrior of Light," which is, well, very interesting indeed. This is something they didn't say at all in the English trailer. So do we get to turn back into the Warrior of Light? Is this Ardbert reborn? Will he take our place on the first as the proper Warrior of Darkness now? Has he been given a second chance, a second coming, so to speak? Since we are probably going back to the source way more permanently now from a story perspective, maybe he has to stay here and stem the tide of light. Maybe we've helped him enough that, you know, he's been reborn and he gets a second chance of protecting everywhere. That would be quite an interesting plot twist in particular. And then when we're looking at Dalamud in the sky, Alphano in French just says, "What does this mean?" Which, is quite a bit different than by the 12, but it's the same sort of idea, I guess. And in the very final line of the trailer from Elidibus, in the French version, it simply says, "Emmett Selk, such behavior is shameful of you," which is a tad less epic, I think. It's more of a slap in the face of Emmett Selk than it is to sort of say anything poetic. But yeah, it does seem to be very different in the other versions. I believe the German one is slightly different as well, but the French one is the most significantly different and adds a lot more storyline that we didn't have before. So after looking at each of those slides and thinking about what they actually mean, along with that interesting French version, it's clear to me that the real storyline then in 5.2 this time around is about discovering how to bring the Scions' bodies back and their souls back together, and that'll be the main focus of the storyline. But then we have the Relic Quest line, which I would imagine many of those cutscenes are actually from 5.25 and onwards, so they're not going to be in 5.2 itself. So by then, the Scions will be back in their bodies like 3 weeks after the patch goes live, sort of thing. The implications of technology, however, used in a Relic questline at Bosjar Citadel and the ability to summon a Dalamud-like event from the Garleans, yeah, I have nothing to say there. That's just a really awesome twist, and I cannot wait to see more. There are plenty of question marks with this trailer in particular, not least of which is actually Xenos being in the first, but I'm sure all will become clear next week. And yeah, get hyped for 5.2, because I have a massive feeling that it's going to be a very powerful conclusion to Shadowbringer's main storyline, and a really wonderful setup for the next storyline that will hopefully carry us into 6.0. Either way, thanks for watching. I know it's a lengthy video, but you can't really break stuff down when you're analyzing, so let me know what I missed in the comment section below, and I'll see you all next time.